Hey, US1, how are you guys doing? I'm back. I survived surgery, so that was exciting. Relatively little pain, at least so far, knock on wood. But yeah, I'm wearing the hat, so I apologize for that, wearing the hat. But one of the things is I haven't bathed yet. It's probably too much information, but let's put it, it's a good thing today's remote learning because you don't want to be like, I've got to smell. But anywho, so I apologize for the hat. But yeah, quick joke. An independent university study has determined that a leading cause of cancer in laboratory rats, scientists. Yeah, think about that one for a while. Okay, so a couple of quick notes and reminders here first. First off, on Friday, the remote learning portfolio is due. Okay, so hopefully you've been working on that. So get that in. Collectively, that's the last big chunk of points for the quarter. Okay, so remember, there's no final. So this is kind of it. Your research outline, which some of you still owe me, get that to me, please, because that's destroying some of your grades. Get that to me. Um, but this outline is the other big giant piece. There'll be a couple more homeworks, not many, because we're just about done, believe it or not. Okay, so that's due on Friday. You also have a quiz on Friday. All right, so it's a Skyward quiz. So it's again that second half hour of our class time. So set an alarm. Don't oversleep. Okay. And so, yeah, so the material for that quiz is all the big business stuff. So going back to two classes ago, where we talked about railroads, last class we talked about Andrew Carnegie, and today we'll talk about John Rockefeller. Okay, so you've got those three sets of notes, including the videos that I gave to you as part of classwork. So I gave you a video on Carnegie, and today there's a video on Rockefeller. Information for the quiz could come out of those videos as well. Okay, so that's what you're looking at there. So yeah, I hope all is well. Stay safe, stay smart. These are some trying times out there. So if you're following the news, the Do Now kind of talks about that. It's good to write about these things and reflect about them. We'll have the Zoom later today. So if you want to talk more about the current events, what's going on in the world, I'll be there. Okay, so the Zoom will be today, not on Friday. So hopefully you see this in time, but I did tell you that a couple days ago. But yeah, okay. So again, I hope all is well. Stay safe, stay smart. Talk to you guys later. So today we'll talk about John Rockefeller. John Rockefeller will not only become the richest man in the United States, but at one time, the richest man on the entire planet. Um, so how did he make all of his money? Well, there's an added video which gives you some good background on his life, but the highlights here is oil. So for Andrew Carnegie, it was steel, right? Steel was how he made his fortune. For John Rockefeller, it's going to be oil. Now, he does not discover oil. He doesn't even mine for the oil or drill for the oil. Instead, he realizes that's a lot of work. That's hit and miss. That's a lot of risk. You're digging for oil. What if you find it? What if you don't find it? A lot of people went bankrupt desperately looking for oil. But once you got it out of the ground, it was worthless. You had to refine it. And so that is what he invested in, refineries, creating a company called Standard Oil in 1870 out in Cleveland. Now, oil was not kind of like what we think of today. So we think of oil today, we think of cars. In 1870, we don't have cars. So cars are a turn of the century type of thing. So we're about 40 years away before cars become, even a passing idea. So in 1870, oil was used as a heating source and as a lighting source and kerosene lamps and that type of stuff. Oil had been coming from whales. But the right whale had been almost hunted to extinction at this point, and whales were becoming harder and harder to find, and the price of oil was going up. And so when crude oil was found in the ground, there was already a demand, and now you have this burgeoning supply. And so Rockefeller sees an opportunity, and he invests in, again, the refining of oil to turn that oil into kerosene, heating and lighting oil. And so he practices something called horizontal consolidation, right? So this is different than what Andrew Carnegie did. So remember, Andrew Carnegie owned each of the steps to make a final product, right? So we're talking about Carnegie, you have several steps to make, steel. He owned every, something from each of the steps. This way he didn't have to go out and pay someone else for any of his ingredients to make steel, right? That's vertical consolidation, right? So think of it as a list on a menu. He owns, rather on a recipe. As you go down the list, right? He owns everything in the list. That's not what Rockefeller does, at least not at the start. Rockefeller's start is horizontal consolidation. Basically, this is a monopoly. He picks one part of the process and controls that part of the process. So all oil that is basically drilled out of the ground is going to go through his refineries, right? And at one point, he will control 90% of the refineries in the United States. And he's kind of ruthless as a business person with this, and that he would undercut his competition. He would buy out his competition. Um, and again, driving away competition makes him the only game in town, which then eventually would allow him to raise his prices even more. Um, and then once he has cornered the market on refineries, he then starts, moving past horizontal consolidation and starts moving towards vertical. So he starts marketing his own products. And so he also was the first businessman to truly understand the idea of modern advertising. Um, and the idea of his having a logo that was easily recognizable, even to the point of marketing his oil in recognizable red cans. So, I mean, I tell a story of going to the grocery store with my daughter when my daughter was maybe 1 year old, and telling my daughter in the soda aisle to go, taking her out of the cart and having her go get a bottle of Coke. Now, my daughter at 1 year old can't read, but she can recognize a bottle of Coke, right? It's red, right? And it's got that little, like, little swish of a line on it, right? And so I remember her getting a 2 liter bottle of Coke, dragging it back to the carriage, and this woman in the aisle thinking I had the most brilliant daughter in the world because she could read at age 1. Like, yeah, no, she just can reckon, she just knows red, and so she associated Coke with red and got the red bottle. And that's kind of what's going on here with his advertising, right? Remember, you're dealing with all these immigrants. They can't read English, can't speak English, but they can recognize symbols, and they can recognize colors, that type of stuff, right? So he creates customer loyalty as a result of this, right? And he understands that people then associate, when you associate a product with quality, they'll always associate that product with quality. So if you think in terms of like phones, right? It's very rare that you find someone who has an iPhone, then gives up the iPhone and then go gets an Android, or has the Android, gives up the iPhone, and bounces back and forth. No, if you have an iPhone, you stick with the iPhone, you become loyal to it. Um, Same thing's true of an Android, you become loyal to it. People are like that with their cars. People are like that with their sneakers. Right? They're only going to buy Nikes. They're only going to buy Brooks, whatever it is. Right? He understood this and used this to his advantage. And moving along, he continues this vertical consolidation, right? Invests in a transportation network to move his product around. And in this aspect, he starts basically manipulating the railroads, in which he's got 90% of the refining business. Right? He can demand whatever price he wants from the railroads because the railroads need his business. So he can get a cheaper price to use the railroads. And of course, his competitors can't get that cheap price. It helps him undercut them. And of course, he can sell his product at a better price. So he called this systematizing. When you have horizontal control, all the refineries, and then start investing in vertical, when you've got horizontal and vertical, he called that systematizing. And that wasn't enough for him. He then went to trusts. And so a trust is basically when you have one managing board of directors that controls lots of different companies. And of course, those different companies don't seem like they might be connected. So an example of this might be like Disney. So if you think Disney is a big company, and Disney puts their name on a lot of things. And so you have everything with Disney's name on it, the theme parks, the cruise ships, the TV stations, that type of stuff, right? But then Disney owns a whole bunch of other stuff that sometimes people don't recognize because the Disney name isn't on it, right? Disney owns ESPN. Disney owns Hulu, right? Disney owns ABC Channel 7, right? Disney owns radio stations, right? They own 95.5 in New York, which I believe now is a Christian rock station. It used to be WPLJ. They own all these little things. They own Marvel. They own Lucasfilm, right? They own all these things now that like it'd be easy to forget they're not Disney, because they don't blatantly put their name on these things. Um, and of course, that is a way. So if someone is not a huge fan of Disney, they can still get around this. Like I remember a friend of mine who didn't like Coke, thought Coke was a big, giant, evil company. So instead, he was going to drink Sprite. And we didn't have to hard to tell them that Coke also made Sprite. They owned Sprite, right? So it's that type of thing. So it isn't called Coca-Cola Sprite or something. Coke doesn't put their name on Sprite. They want you to think it's a separate company, separate from Coke. This way, if you don't like Coke, you could still like Sprite. And then later on, you find out, oh my goodness, they're owned by the same person, right? That's what a trust is. Okay. Um, and so this is systematizing, and this gives Rockefeller tremendous power, right? And you can imagine just the stranglehold he has on industry at this time. And this was not popular. There's a lot of people that didn't like him. And so they saw Standard Oil was sometimes called the octopus, because they had their hands in everything. If you look at this political cartoon, you see the tentacles of the octopus, wrapping around the White House, going towards the Capitol, that type of thing. That Standard Oil was kind of everywhere. And eventually the government has to do something about it, and they break it up into smaller companies. But of course, when you break it up into smaller companies, Rockefeller still even benefited from that.